I've seen a lot of videos of far left and right wing people fighting in the streets recently. There's one video where I guess I saw it on Twitter. A guy walks into a crowd of Trump supporters and then a fight breaks out. This is an escalation in a sense. We've seen a lot of the bigger street battles with Antifa and the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer and things like that. But now we're just seeing these like pocket skirmishes popping up at non-events. It's one thing when Trump supporters say, hey, we're going to do an event, and Antifa shows up. It's another thing when some random Trump supporters are walking around and then some dude gets in their face and a fight breaks out. The reason I bring this up is that it seems like, I don't know, things are getting worse. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but man, is it exhausting. We have this post on Medium, Google's Outrage Mobs and Witch Hunts by Mike Wacker, May 21st. In this post, which we'll read through a little bit, there's some interesting stories and points to be made. Mike Wacker is a Google employee who is talking about the outrage culture and how you can get punished for anything because what these activists do is they'll interpret anything you say to be a violation of their policies. So let's say you make a comment about, I don't know, you said you listened to something from Jordan Peterson, and that's one of the references they use. Someone could then later claim to HR he was supporting Jordan Peterson, who's an alt-right, and that's really scary. We shouldn't have that here. And then HR doesn't know or care what you said, just that you were supporting an ideology when you maybe just said, I watched his video. They can interpret it however they want and make whatever claim they want. I think one of the really important aspects of our culture that is often ignored is the right to confront your accuser. This would prevent a lot of this nonsense. But this man, Mike Wacker, was fired. Is that surprising to anybody? I mean, especially if you read the title of this video, you knew where I was going. From the Daily Caller, Google fires Republican engineer who spoke out against outrage mobs. The Republican Google engineer who penned an open letter about the company's outrage mobs and witch hunts was fired on Friday, the Daily Caller has learned. So we'll read this. We'll read a little bit of what he posted. Before we move on, go to timcast.com/donate if you would like to support my work. There's a monthly donation option, a cryptocurrency option, and a physical address where you can send me stuff if you'd like. Of course, the best thing you can do is just like and comment below because the engagement really helps. Subscribe if you haven't already, and share the video if you really like it, because that is quite literally the best thing you can do. YouTube really loves shares. They say, last Wednesday, Mike Wacker was put on paid administrative leave and fired 2 days later. The day before his suspension, Wacker went on Fox Business to discuss the company's anti-conservative bias before his suspension, telling Trish Reagan, you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going to offend somebody next. And a lot of the time, they're going to HR over these trivial things. Wacker was the moderator of the Republicans' listserv at Google and detailed in a Medium post his disputes with left-wing employees, several of which escalated into official complaints. The firing came just before news broke over the weekend that the Department of Justice was preparing an antitrust probe into the search giant. The company filed an appeal yesterday against a $1.7 billion antitrust penalty imposed by the European Commission over AdSense, Google's ad sales platform. A spokesperson for Google declined to comment for this article. So in his post, which it's really long, so I don't think we'll be able to read everything, he brings up a bunch of really important points and kind of terrifying points. But let's just read a little bit of this. He writes, Google has become a company where outrage mobs and witch hunts dominate its culture. These outrage mobs and witch hunts have become an existential threat not only to Google's culture internally, but to Google's trust and credibility externally. Warning for anybody who holds stock in Google. I certainly don't. Google has long claimed to be a nonpartisan company. Yet, like many other tech companies, they also maintain many policies against hate speech. How do we reconcile these two apparently conflicting goals? While this statement came from a spokesperson on Facebook, it could just as easily apply to Google, Twitter, and many other tech companies. We've always banned individuals or organizations that promote or engage in violence and hate, regardless of ideology. That's not true. Carlos Maza encouraged people to commit a crime against other people. He's certainly not getting in trouble for that. An astute reader will notice that this response does not actually answer the question. It merely shifts it from one point to another. Instead of asking, is Google a nonpartisan company? We instead ask, does Google apply a nonpartisan definition of hate speech? As for Facebook, we know they have a list of hate agents that includes Candace Owens. So what exactly is the definition of hate speech? Well, let's just ask the outrage mobs at Google that succeeded. One outrage mob formed when Google sponsored CPAC, and they created an internal petition titled Google don't sponsor hate. Another outrage mob formed when K. Cole James, president of the Heritage Foundation, was appointed to an AI ethics panel, and they created an external petition from a Medium account called Googlers Against Transphobia and Hate. But don't worry, these outrage mobs are not opposed to all conservatives. They are only opposed to the hateful conservatives. I think we realize that means all conservatives and any liberal who dare support free expression and freedom in general. These outrage mobs against hate have become honeypots for toxic, hostile, and uncivil discourse. While some of their rhetoric is so outlandish that you have no choice but to laugh at it, the psychological effects that these outrage mobs have on their targets is nothing to laugh about. Just read this excerpt from K. Coles James about her own experience with Google's outrage mob. She says, "In 1961, at age 12, I was one of 24 black children who integrated an all-white junior high school in Richmond. White parents jeered me outside the school and inside. Their kids stuck me with pins, shoved me inside the halls, and pushed me down the stairs. So when the group of Google employees resorted to calling names and making false accusations because they didn't want a conservative voice advising the company, the hostility was reminiscent of what I felt back then. The same intolerance for someone who is different from them." I'd like to stress, while I don't know the ethnic background, racial identity of those people who attacked this prestigious, black conservative, what we do know is that progressives are overwhelmingly white and making more than $100,000 a year. There are several data points. The Atlantic published a story about this. Is it at all surprising then that Google, that is majority white and Asian, would take this position against a black conservative? I don't care what the politics of the person is. When a group of people attack, throw milkshakes at, target people, especially minorities, yeah. Let's talk about what real social justice is. Equality and fairness for all is just justice. But these people certainly don't believe in it. They're lying. They're insane. They're out of their minds. We are talking about dangerous people who have no real ideology other than attack, attack, attack. It is a chaotic, destructive force with no goal. And that's why Barack Obama said it is a circular firing squad. The left is being eaten alive by their own ideology, and it's going to pave the way for right-wing nationalists, populists, etc. If you're a populist, nationalist, or etc., well, then you are going to reap the benefits of this complete psychosis. Granted, it is frustrating and crazy to see, the results of the culture war, especially like this guy getting fired. But in the end, I really do believe we're going to come to a point where regular Americans are going to wake up to this. They're going to see this and think, this is insane. And I think it's already happening. Gallup and Pew, as I mentioned many, many times, show most Democrats want moderate policy, and this stuff is out of it's just nuts. He goes on to say, "I won't lie, that was a tough part to read. But if you ask the outrage mob, that wasn't the real problem. The real question was this. So the real question to this is whether or not we think there's value in having the grand wizard of the Klan on this board. That's what the activists claimed, that a black woman who fought for civil rights and was a victim of white identitarianism back in the 60s is now literally the people." It's fascinating when they call like Ben Shapiro alt-right. It's mind-numbing. He's the biggest target of these people. They're all the same as far as I'm concerned, the racial identitarians. What sort of alternative universe do you have to live in to think this sort of rhetoric is okay? And what sort of alternative universe do you have to live in where you turn a blind eye to that rhetoric? He goes on to say, as I explained in a previous post, these outrage mobs and witch hunts don't just target outsiders like CPAC and K. Coles James. They also target insiders and Google's own employees. Whether the target is external or internal, the goal of these outrage mobs and witch hunts is the same: to control who belongs at Google. Break it up. Just break it up. Man, I am ready to hop. So you guys know, I'm building this van. I've been posting photos on Instagram, and it's about done. And I am going to go off to the mountains, and I'm going to go fishing. I'll still make videos. That's the point of the van. I can still work. But man, it's going to be so great just to be out of the city and just be with nature. You'll see some deer, and then, you'll see some other wild animals, some beavers maybe doing their beaver thing. And I'll be sitting there, and I'll be fishing, and I'll be like, man, it sure is good to get away from these lunatics. But I'll tell you what, the biggest problem isn't necessarily, in my opinion, the activists. Necessarily. Because you can always find a different source. The biggest problem is the fragility of our society and our culture. These people are extremely fragile, and so they shriek and freak out at any little thing. I mean, one of the things he tells in the story is that one guy made a comment about Jordan Peterson, And so someone said they felt unsafe and he got called into HR. The problem is that HR called him in the first place. Seriously, what the hell's wrong with you people? They're scared of lawsuits. We've become too fragile. You know what, man? I don't care. Like, you want to come in and you want to threaten me. I just don't care. You have no leverage on me because I don't care enough. One of the most freeing things in the world is just not caring. And I think my attitude stems from, being homeless, growing up on the south side of Chicago. There is nothing you can hold over my head. There is no sort of Damocles dangling above me to which I have anxiety. If all of my channels got deleted overnight, I'd be like, oh, how about that? And I'd go skateboarding. It'd be kind of a weight off my shoulders. You have no leverage on me. You want to come into me and complain that someone commented about Jordan Peterson? I will fire you in 2 seconds. Don't waste my time with this insane nonsense. You're an adult. You come to me and said, somebody was talking about watching a Jordan Peterson video and I feel unsafe. I'll be like, wow, you better leave. I'm sorry. It was nice working with you. You feel unsafe about that. Wow. Why aren't businesses doing this? You can fire these people. Just do it. Why punish the dude who watched a stupid YouTube video instead of just getting rid of the people who are terrified of their own shadows? I'm sorry. If you come to me and say that someone made an explicit threat, broke the law, I'd be like, we'll take care of it. They violate specific policies around actual harassment. Oh, we'll take care of it. If you come to me and said somebody watched a goddamn YouTube video where Jordan Peterson talked about his opinion, I'd be like, are you seriously coming to me right now to tell me some silly little anecdote about someone watching a video on the internet? You are wasting my time and you don't have the mental capacity or wherewithal to be in this business. These companies, however, will bend over backwards for the most ridiculous and absurd complaints. Why? Seriously, why? Oh no, somebody watched a video about Jordan Peterson. Stop the presses. Shut the company down. Everybody gets a paid sick day. We can't have that. Who watched the Jordan Peterson video? I'm sorry. You are being sent home. You are fired. I'm not going to read through this. It's really long. I'll put the link to his post in the description below. But there's a lot of really, really important things. He says, I myself didn't want to get drawn into an extensive debate on that topic, but I did want to state my views and express support for K. Coles James. Thus, I decided to write this simple post. To be clear, had the council still existed with K. Coles James on it, James would have felt welcome during council meetings to express the views she expressed in her tweets, including her views about the Equality Act. And so he then has a bunch of links. But we'll just get to his final point, I guess. He's got some citations or some addendums. He says, if left unchecked, these outrage mobs will hunt down any conservative, any Christian, and any independent freethinker at Google who does not bow to their agenda. Anyone who stands up to them will be hounded until they either shut the F up or get the F out. Furthermore, Google HR has clearly shown that they function as an accessory to these witch hunts. As I said before, once you control who belongs at Google, you can control what content belongs at Google. The most important point. We've heard this over and over again. This man certainly isn't the first, and he won't be the last. We've heard Jack Dorsey. He actually said conservative employees at Twitter are scared to speak up. We've heard conservative employees at Facebook have been forming groups. It's not even about being conservative. I don't know if you're familiar with Keemstar, but I cited him the past few days. He is a very, very high-profile YouTuber. He talks about YouTube culture and drama stuff, and he does branch out outside of YouTube. I don't want to pigeonhole him. I'm not super familiar with all his videos. I don't really watch his content. I mean no disrespect to Keemstar for saying that. But the reason I bring him up and the reason it's important you understand I don't watch his content is he's in a different world. Keemstar has like 2.5 million followers. He's got millions and millions of subscribers. He gets millions and millions of views. And he tweeted, the left is always trying to deplatform the right. The right doesn't try to deplatform the left. And that forces independents to side with conservatives, people like Keemstar. I feel it's really crazy to see someone like Keemstar, who is more of a entertainment personality, as opposed to news and culture. Well, I shouldn't say news and culture, but like news and politics. He's now tweeting about this. I'm seeing other big YouTubers, because of the Vox adpocalypse, tweeting about these issues. Some people were tweeting things like Gamergate was right. They called this out. So one thing I always want to stress when it comes to these issues, and this is branching off the idea, this guy was fired from Google, okay? He was fired from Google after saying, hey, we got to stop this. I don't want to say Gamergate was right. I don't know too much about Gamergate or just some like ethics in journalism. I know the journalists pushed back. I think the journalists are liars for the most part, and we see that today. But what we can see is Whatever this regressive identitarianism is, this outrage fragility, this left-wing fragility that we're seeing where everyone they shriek at the simplest sentence. It's not that people are being red-pilled, as they say. It's that it's spreading. It's getting worse. It's infecting more and more places. It's impacting more and more industries and cultures, and it's creating more and more of a crisis. So I will stress this. When I talk about the quote, civil war, end quote, I always stress, I'd make that bet. I'd be willing to make that bet. And it's not from me. It's not a conspiracy theory. There was a Wall Street Journal, I believe it was Wall Street Journal or Atlantic. They actually did an interview with several security experts who made that prediction. So I am no one to ever think there's a conspiracy or, some ridiculous event about to happen. But I will say, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are a bunch of videos of people fighting in the streets. And the important point is it's not Trump rallies. It's now literally just people walking around getting attacked. Tons and tons of videos. It's crazy to see this. It's like some dudes will go walking around and some guy will come up and start fighting them. We've seen people, there was one story where a guy had a Trump sticker and they pulled him out of his car and beat the crap out of him or something like that. Something's coming. It's not, I don't know when it's going to happen. What I can say is that we are seeing an escalation of the regressive far left to a rather psychotic degree. And I'm going to go into depth in this on my main channel later today at 4 p.m., so stick around. There's some really interesting data points showing that the death of journalism coincided with the rise of left-wing identitarianism. But the point I'm trying to make is, when it was just video games and in the culture war, nobody really cared. But now it's impacting more national level politics. It's spreading to other cultures, music, comics, etc. What do you think is going to happen when it hits Major League Sports? It will. Absolutely. Absolutely it will. The rules in the NBA are arbitrary. We could simply change the rules to demand that we do 50% men and women on those teams. What do you think is going to happen when you start seeing wave after wave of articles saying the NBA needs to become more inclusive? Why is it that only men are competing in these sports? What do you think is going to happen now that we're seeing this rise of biological males competing in women's sports? Whether you agree with it or not is not the point. I'm not here to argue for or against. I'm here to state it's causing a dramatic rift where now suburban families are being pulled into this because their daughters are being displaced. The issue isn't, and I'll lightly clarify in this, when it comes to the trans women competing with females, it's not an issue of them winning first place as they try to obfuscate the argument. It's an issue of low-tier men who can't compete becoming high-tier women in their competitions and displacing women. So if you have 10 top positions that will get scholarships, yes, it is very likely a trans woman will displace some of these biological females. That is not to say the trans women will win. They often don't. But it will mean that 10th place female who is the top 10 in the nation or in the state who fought very, very hard to train day in, day out will be removed because of the physical disadvantages. These things are spreading. It's going to get worse. It's going to impact television. We've already seen demands that TV shows change, late night hosts change, movies, for instance, getting woke and going broke. Booksmart just came out. Olivia Wilde says Booksmart was like one of the reviews that was like super bad, but it was made by women for women, and it flopped. It was a big flop. It missed its projections by nearly 50%. I'm not saying they shouldn't make movies like that. I heard the movie was actually funny, but we're seeing this negatively impact businesses. We're seeing it spread to other major cultures, subcultures. And what do you think is going to happen when they take out something that is extremely mainstream? The Simpsons are already doing it. The Simpsons apparently had an episode where Bart was mad that Itchy and Scratchy got replaced by females, or it was an all-female Itchy and Scratchy reboot. They did one episode where Abe Simpson experimented with homosexuality. A lot of these things I'm not saying are necessarily right or wrong. It's not the argument to make. Like if Abe Simpson wants to experiment, I really don't care. The issue is more so it's happening super fast. It's a dramatic shock to the system. And when the system is shocked, crazy things happen. So when we start seeing shows like, look at Family Guy. Let's talk about culture war stuff. Family Guy has stereotypes, homosexuals, Jews, black people. They mock and ridicule, and they do it all day and night. Steven Crowder has lost access to demonetization on YouTube because he made similar jokes to what Family Guy would make. What do you think is going to happen when Family Guy and American Dad get shut down? What do you think is going to happen when they start canceling shows and replacing them with woke, unfunny things? You will see the mainstream freak out. And the rift is going to get really, really bad. It's not being mended, it's being made worse. With YouTube's latest decision, it's only going to get worse, especially when you start silencing people who are trying to push back on the psychosis. This is a really good example. I'll end with this because this turned out to be a really long video, and man, I have a sore throat. This guy said, hey man, witch hunts are bad. Don't do it. What happened? He got the X. They're coming for you next. It's not over. And what terrifies me the most is that these street fights are getting worse. I kid you not. The news doesn't report on all of these, but they are happening. The videos are going viral. You can see it happening. Is it worse than it's ever been? I don't know. But the polarization seems to be. And I feel like it can only go in one direction. In the end, hey man, it's going to be to the mass benefit of China. So welcome to the future. The future will be under a Chinese cultural system. At least that's what it looks like right now. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. More segments to come. The next video will be on this channel at 1 p.m. and I will see you all then.